You felt it as a decision. Conscious. Yours. Something you arrived at. After thinking. After weighing. After considering what made sense. After turning it over. Just enough times. For it to feel deliberate. As if the moment belonged. To the visible part of you. As if thought had led. And everything else. Had followed. But what you didn't see. Is that by the time you noticed the decision. Most of it had already happened. Not in thought. Not in language. Not in the careful sequence you later used to explain it to yourself. But somewhere earlier, quieter, faster, further beneath the surface than reflection can easily reach. Before you had the chance to question it. Before doubt could interrupt it. Before your mind stepped in and called it choice. There is always a moment. Before the moment you remember. A moment with no clear edge. No declaration. No signal strong enough to announce itself as important. A shift that doesn't announce itself. A subtle reorientation. A slight turning of attention. A nearly invisible movement toward one path and away from another. A movement so small, it doesn't register as movement. It feels natural. It feels unremarkable. It passes beneath notice. Precisely because it is already familiar. Only later does it become visible as a choice. Only after it has gathered form. Only after thought arrives to name what has already begun. But by then, it is already in motion, already aligned, already leaning in a specific direction, already carrying the weight of prior patterns you did not feel activating. This is what makes it convincing. It doesn't feel imposed. It doesn't feel external. It doesn't feel like pressure arriving from outside and forcing your hand. It feels like you, like your reasoning, your preference, your conclusion, your own inner voice, reaching a sensible end. But familiarity is not the same as authorship, and what feels like identity is often just repetition, experienced from the inside. A pattern rehearsed so often, it no longer appears. This pattern, only as truth, only as instinct, only as something that seems self-evident, because it has moved through you many times before. The system that moves you does not wait for clarity. It does not pause for reflection. It does not stand still until your conscious mind has gathered enough language to approve what is happening. It does not ask for permission. It anticipates. It predicts. It reads fragments. It completes sequences. It prepares responses before the situation fully unfolds, before the moment is named, before the scene is understood, before you have fully entered it with awareness. And when the moment arrives, what you call a decision is often just the final step to the process, already underway, already prepared, already shaped by currents older than the thought that now claims to explain it. Thought enters as an explanation, not as an origin. It organizes what is already happening. It arranges. It interprets. Gives order to impulses, tones, and leanings that were active before language took hold. Gives shape to what is already moving. It builds coherence after the direction has begun to settle. Builds a narrative that makes the direction feel intentional, clean, reasonable, chosen, even when it wasn't, even when intention arrived after movement, even when the story was written in reverse. There is comfort in believing you are choosing, because if you are choosing, you are in control. And if you are in control, nothing is happening without your approval. Nothing is moving ahead of you. Nothing is shaping you while you remain unaware. But continuity does not require approval. Only repetition. Only familiarity. Only a path that has been walked enough times to feel inevitable, enough times to feel natural, enough times to become difficult to distinguish from desire itself. Before the decision, there is a shift. Before the shift, there is a trigger. Before the trigger, there is a sensitivity, readiness, the particular openness to one kind of signal. and not another. And that sensitivity was shaped long before this moment existed, by memory, by pattern, by what was repeated, until it became orientation, by what the system learned to notice, to follow, to avoid, which means what feels immediate is rarely new. It feels sudden only because you are meeting it late. It is the surface of something that has been forming over time, quietly, incrementally, below the threshold where thought usually watches. By the time you notice yourself choosing, your attention has already narrowed. Certain details have already brightened. Others have already faded. Your interpretation has already formed. Your emotional tone has already tilted. The outcome, the atmosphere inside you, has already changed. What seems reasonable, what feels safe, what feels necessary, the direction is already set. Not absolutely, not forever, but enough that the final movement feels less like creation and more like completion. All that remains is to follow it, to name it, to justify it, to call it yours, even though much of it began long before you believed you had begun. If there is a place where something can shift, it is not at the decision, not at the point where the movement has already taken shape, not at the moment when thought steps in and gives it a name. It is before it, before the explanation, before the conclusion, before the inner sentence that says, "This is what I want," in the moment where the direction is not yet fixed, where several possibilities still exist, without any of them having fully taken hold, where attention has not fully narrowed, where perception has not yet locked onto a single interpretation, where the field is still open enough for something else to be noticed, where the body has not fully committed to what comes next, where the breath has not yet adjusted to the pattern, where the internal momentum has begun to gather but has not yet become fate. That moment is brief, smaller than you expect, quieter than thought. It does not announce itself as important. It passes quickly, unstable, because it can tilt in more than one direction. Because once attention closes, it becomes harder since that there was ever another possibility at all. Easy to miss, easy to pass over, easy to mistake for nothing but real as any decision that comes after it, perhaps more real, because this is the point where movement is still movement, before it becomes identity, before it becomes certainty, before it becomes the version of events you later call me. You didn't suddenly choose differently. That is not what happened. You did not become a different person in a single instant. You did not overpower the process. You noticed earlier than usual, earlier than the explanation, earlier than the moment when the pattern normally becomes indistinguishable from intention. You saw the direction before it became inevitable. You sensed the lean while it was still a lean. You recognized the pull before it hardened into action. And in that space, small as it is, fragile as it is, even if nothing changes immediately, even if the body still carries old momentum, even if the old response still completes itself, one more time, something fundamental has already shifted, because now the process is no longer fully invisible. Now there is a witness, where before there was only momentum, because what was once invisible is now being seen, not perfectly, not all at once, but early enough to interrupt the illusion that it simply appeared out of nowhere. And what is seen early enough no longer carries the same certainty, no longer feels quite as unquestionable, no longer moves with the same authority it once had when it passed unseen. Not because you stopped it, not because you controlled it, not because awareness instantly erased what repetition has built, but because for the first time, you were there, before it became you, before the pattern finished dressing itself in your voice, before the explanation, sealed the experience, and called it choice. And once you have been there, even once, something remains. A small opening, a different kind of timing, the beginning of a freedom that does not start at the moment of decision, but at the moment just before it.